I now need to take the second half of this to explain my letter and how that, in my view, complements the very solid and fine proposal that the city manager has brought forward. I want to make two initial points. One is just maybe a matter of personal privilege. And I want to say this every time. No matter what else has gone right or wrong over the last 4 years in this city and during my tenure as mayor, this passing the second half of Measure U in November of 2018 has saved the city's fiscal situation and allowed us and enabled us to invest in so much more than we otherwise would have been able to invest in. I mean, look at the Measure U number that Emily put up there a moment ago. It's $125 million. The second half is $62 million. We would take $62 million off that bottom line and be talking about a very different situation if we hadn't taken that to the voters and if the voters hadn't said yes. I'm grateful for that. The second thing is, I want to again compliment the city manager and his staff for essentially helping us budget in a way that leaves us as the elected policymakers more room to be able to invest in the community. What do I mean by that? What Ms. Combs and the city manager have presented here this afternoon, yes, it has some red ink in the out years, but it also includes $25 million of labor expenditures over the course of the revenue period. It includes $23 million for the upcoming budget to make sure that we've got a balanced budget by the end of 22-23. It includes $12.3 million for debt service. It includes $3.4 million of an economic uncertainty to add to the economic uncertainty fund. So what I have proposed, in my view, builds upon what the city manager has presented in the following way. I say that instead of using $27 million and keep it in reserve for budget years 23-24, 24-25, and 25-26, that instead we invest that in a one-time basis in urgent community priorities. Now, is this out of the norm in terms of the way that the city has budgeted or dealt with its mid-year surpluses in prior years? Not at all. Look at last year, for example. Last year, the Department of Finance projected out-year deficits in 3 comparable years, totaling $33 million. And we invested in all kinds of community priorities: youth, housing, public safety, $41 million of one-time money. And we still have a surplus mid-year this year. Contrast this with what I am proposing to add to the city manager's foundation here. This year, the out-year deficits in those succeeding 3 years is $27 million projected. So what I'm suggesting this year is consistent with what we have done every single year. And because the Department of Finance, I think appropriately, budgets conservatively, even on the revenue side, they give us this headroom, frankly, every mid-year. And at the end of the year, to be able to help define community priorities, then suggest where we might make those investments. And that's what I am proposing this year. So what do I suggest we do with that $27 million? I suggest that we put $14.8 million of it into affordable housing and homelessness, that we replenish the Affordable Housing Trust Fund to the tune of $10 million, which is not a lot of money. But by the way, what Emily presented in that second scenario is that, frankly, the general fund owes the Housing Trust Fund $7.5 million, because the city manager and I, as we always do, and we always will do, work collaboratively, and He asked informally if they could borrow that money for the fire diversity positions as well as the contracts. I, of course, said yes. The understanding was that that would go back into the Housing Trust Fund. That's 7.2 million. I'm proposing 10, just an additional 2.8. In addition, I suggest, and this is maybe my strongest recommendation of all the recommendations, that in addition to the 19 positions, 17, by the way, of which will be non-code enforcement outreach workers, that the city manager proposes to add to the Department of Community Response. I've worked with Bridget Dean and the city manager, and she has told us that with an additional $2.8 million, she can literally contract with CBOs to have outreach teams in every city council district in a way that will address one of the biggest problems we have here as a city. And frankly, one of the biggest confidence problems we have, that people are desperate for a resolution on more of these tent encampments to help more people, but also to create a cleaner and safer city. And under the existing DCR structure and resources, she can't possibly get to these without long waiting lists. Between the 19 positions, again, 17 of which are outreach workers, the 2.8 million, which will give her the contracting capacity to work with the CBOs, it won't be perfect. I ain't overselling here, but it will be much better. And we will be able to get more out there more and create more relief. Combine that with 102 acres with the other sites that the manager and I and the city council are working on to stand up quickly. Maybe 2022 will be the year where we begin moving the needle. But the outreach piece of this is crucial, especially as we seek this enhanced partnership with the county. I also suggest that we put $1 million into the coordinated access system. This is crucial. If we don't have a coordinated entry system for homelessness in the city and the county, our efforts will be fragmented and will not be nearly as successful as they otherwise could be. But I do this, I hope, in a smart way. I suggest $1 million, but only if the county and the COC kicks in their $1 million. It's going to require that kind of investment and collaboration for us to create the single point of entry. I also suggest setting aside another $1 million for women and children's shelter resources. This comes up every year. They're among our most vulnerable populations. And so let's give ourselves that flexibility. My letter also suggests that we put $3.2 million into one-time discrete economic development initiatives. I'm really excited about the proposal for $2 million for the La Familia Opportunity Center. Our Latino community in Sacramento, our Latinx community, deserves this recognition and this investment. We need a center of community for our Latinx community in South Sacramento and throughout Sacramento. And La Familia is one of our most important and successful CBOs that serves not just the Latinx community, but all our diverse communities at Sacramento. They have a plan to build a center. We've gone to the state for money and are talking to our state legislators, but this would give them a boost and a start to build something that will be a legacy for the future generations of Sacramentans. I also suggest, and I want to thank Mayor Pro Tem Guerra, that we put $1 million into the California Mobility Center. And by the way, down the line, whether it's through EIFD or other creative financing mechanisms, I'm going to make even larger proposals for investing in this mobility center because I think it's that important. But right now, the city's role with Councilmember Guerra, Mayor Pro Tem Guerra's service on their board is to really focus on workforce and workforce training, just like we've done with Aggie Square. And so this $1 million will go a long way showing our partnership. $200,000 to the Wind Park Latino Center of Art and Culture, a crucial project. A little bit of money will help them finish that project. And then working with council members Vang and Councilmember Chenier and Councilmember Jennings and everybody, frankly, I want to see us continue to invest in young people. $5.5 million to build on our investments from ARP and from CARES and from last year's mid-year. And then specifically, we've made a point of looking at areas of the city that have not gotten the attention that they need or deserve. Look what we did this last year with Northgate Boulevard. Look what we did with Del Paso Boulevard. We're looking at areas all throughout the city, and we'll leave nobody behind, especially if we have a little bit of time. This mid-year, I want to focus on Marina Vista and Alder Grove. Councilmember Valenzuela has been out there working hard to organize the people of this community. It's a low-income community with lots of kids. You've got the school nearby. They need so much more attention, so many more resources, so many more youth programs, so many more safety measures. And of course, the Housing Authority is also engaged and leading as well on much of this. But I want this $2.5 million to give Councilmember Valenzuela and this community a chance to dream and to do, especially around investing more in young people. And then finally, an additional $500,000 for the city's racial equity initiatives to develop a virtual resource center, to support the development of a racial equity council and a network of CBOs, to provide grants to hire sensitive and trauma-informed mediators, facilitators, mental health counselors, to be able to work with, to go deeper when it comes to our mission to create greater racial equity in Sacramento. And then, of course, to really look at what it's going to take to develop a national policy around reparations for African Americans. So important. And I said finally, but finally, I want to continue to invest in the fuel network. I mean, this has sort of been an afterthought, and I know that the fuel network, we got to continue to ask them to search for funds themselves and continue to grow this thing. But as long as we have one-time money and we can help and protect immigrants and refugees and make sure that Sacramento is always known as a welcoming place, I think $500,000 is a worthy investment. And so that's the add-on, if you will, on the excellent foundation that the city manager and the budget team have put forward. And I look forward to our discussion about the manager's framework, about my complementary add-on, and about how we continue to both operate in a sound fiscal manner and at the same time we provide hope to our community. That's always the balance, and I think we're doing it pretty well.